The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
Hi, this is Vanessa Marshall. I play Hera Syndulla on Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to the Secrets of Star Wars podcast. May the Force be with you always.
You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, episode 147.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Hi, I'm Robert King, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away. From movies to books to TV shows and more, we're looking at the deeper themes and meanings found in Star Wars. Today, we're discussing The Bad Batch, Episode 6 of Season 2. Joining me today on the panel are Jon Koral.
Hello.
And Ryan Nafziger.
Glad to be back.
Welcome to both of you. So today we're talking about the episode called Tribe. In this episode, the Bad Batch rescue the Wookie Jedi Gungi from being sold into slavery and return him to his homeworld of Kashyyyk, which is having some trouble of its own. There's a lot going on in this episode, so why don't we just take it step by step, so we don't miss anything. I thought it was amazing how we got right into the episode coming up on this really cool looking station that is apparently owned by the Vanguard Axis. Are either of you guys familiar with the Vanguard Axis?
I hadn't heard of it before this episode.
Yeah, neither had I. So, but you know, the Star Wars universe is just littered with these sort of smuggling organizations and organized crime, and so I'm assuming they are one of these. And it just struck me, like right from the beginning, there's this kind of sense that the Bad Batch is kind of dealing with people who are not the most morally upright. I was wondering, you know, we've been setting the Bad Batch up as kind of heroic people, as people who stand up for what they believe, even when things aren't going the way they're supposed to. And here they are forging materials and giving them to smugglers or trading them with smugglers and such. Are they compromising their principles? What's going on here? What do you think?
I was kind of thinking about that on the last episode I was on, which was the one where Sid goes to the racing planet and she kind of meets up with the rival sort of crime ringleader. And I think it's interesting that the Batch is kind of turned a blind eye to all the jobs that they're doing. They certainly have some good ones that they're doing, but they've probably behind the scenes had to do some either, you know, the boring ones like smuggling how many cartons of Nerf nuggets or something like that, or selling the Nerf nuggets, to now this where it's actually really morally dubious, assuming that Nerf nuggets aren't something evil.
That may be a big assumption.
Who knows? This is Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that was, I mean, obviously smuggling, and they're giving them those codes. But the thing that I was also wondering, though, too, is we never do find out. Are they just doing it for a payment, or is it a trade of something else and stuff, too, that, you know, it's like, that's the other thing that I'm assuming it was just going to be a payment, but you never got to that point of here's what we're giving you in exchange for these codes.
Yeah, it wasn't entirely clear, was it?
Right.
No.
No, and you're right. One of my frustrations with this season so far has been that, like, the end of season 1 left me wanting to see this kind of character arc of the Bad Batch and Crosshair interacting more, and we've been getting sort of a series of mostly self-contained episodes. But I think, Ryan, you're right. There is kind of this pattern of Sid is asking them to do more and more morally gray stuff, and they're having to decide how they're going to deal with that. And yeah, it's interesting that Omega, like, she's told, stay here, keep watch, I'm going to get the ship ready, and then immediately she runs off.
Classic.
Yeah. And discovers these droids that are torturing this young Wookiee. I almost wanted to, like, it would totally not have fit the tone of the scene, but I really wanted to say, I suggest a new strategy. Let the Wookiee win, because, you know, droids don't pull people's arms out of their sockets, but Wookiees do.
That would be funny.
Might not have fit the tone of the scene. But Omega is the one who's like, sorry, I kind of rabbit trailed myself there, didn't I? Omega is the one who's kind of standing up for, you know, it doesn't matter what we're being asked to do. We've got to do what's right, what's good. And
yeah, she and Echo kind of have been doing that a lot on this series, in this season. Echo kind of started with the whole, well, we should be doing more. There's a whole bunch of people out there that are getting hurt and they need our help, and we can help them. And then Omega's always been like that. So yeah, I think it was interesting to have, I believe it was Echo and Omega who were both behind. And I think that there might be something a little bit deeper to the fact that they decided to stay back with the ship while the rest of the batch went and cut the deal. Because we knew going into it, the batch was saying amongst themselves, you know, these guys are like they're known slave traders or something like that. Like they're definitely known for doing bad things. And I think it might just be a coincidence that it was Omega and Echo behind, but I don't think it is, because of how things have been brewing with this season, where you already have the two of them starting to really take a very principled moral stance on what they should be doing with the skills and powers that they have.
I'm, you know, as we're talking, I'm getting more and more excited to see whether and how that kind of theme gets developed over the course of the season. Yeah, that would be fascinating. I loved how starkly it was put when Hunter and Tech and Wrecker finally join the fight. You get Hunter speaking for the group. You can't. What is it he says exactly? It's like you can't sell living beings. And the droid replies, for the right price, I can do whatever I want. And talk about, you know, this stark contrast of moral principles. And yet, yeah, Hunter did seem to leave, like, the ones who might object morally behind so that they could cut the deal. And
well, I mean, the thing, yeah, I mean, it was for the right price, and then the droid said stand down or be destroyed. And it was great seeing Hunter and the group, you know, just automatically standing up. They didn't, it's like, what are we doing? You know, even though Echo and Omega are the, you know, are kind of leading the charge of the principles, or the principle, you know, of, you know, protecting and doing more, you know, the rest of the team is right there behind them. So that was what I enjoyed seeing too, though. It wasn't just, you know, okay, well, we just got to get out of here, leave the Wookiee, we're going. You know, it was, here, we got to help you out. And so it's like they are on the same page, even though Omega and Echo might be a little further ahead on the, you know, doing what's right for the principles.
Yeah, they definitely stick together. Something that hasn't come out a lot in the movies, but comes out more in the TV shows, is this kind of undercurrent of slave trade in the Star Wars universe. And like the two the two species that I often see being traded as slaves. Oh, now I'm blanking on the name of the other one. With the head tails.
Twi'leks.
The Twi'leks. Thank you. But the Twi'leks and the Wookiees, and it's interesting to see that, kind of continuing as a, the Wookiees are treated as not worth considering people. And I wonder, and it's interesting that they're being treated that way by droids who also are kind of not acknowledged as a slave population or an enslaved population, but are, both of these, the Wookiees and the droids we saw like in the Solo movie, and then, Wookiees and Twi'leks in other media, they talk about it and kind of ignore the droids. Are droids people? Do they have rights? Star Wars doesn't always like to talk about that.
Well, the question I had when I was watching it, and then even watching it the second time, when you see Gungi get his lightsaber, because I guess that's what he was looking for back in the chest, and when he was frantic, and then I think the droid, has it like on a holster or something, or something, and then that's how he gets it, right? If I can remember. And my question I was wondering is, when he says this, is he being sold as a slave, or is he being sold as a found Jedi? And I was kind of curious. They never said that, because obviously, the first thought is, they're doing it because Wookiees are enslaved typically and stuff. But I was just wondering, is the money for that, is he holding on to the lightsaber and they're just going to sell him as a slave, or is he doing that and he's going to be returned to the Empire or something as a, I don't know if there's, and then get questioned like, hey, do you know where your other Jedi friends are? That kind of stuff. But so I just didn't know. That's what I was wondering. And there wasn't any more detail into, what the reason for his capture was, or who he was going to. And
yeah, definitely could have gone either way, because like we know the droid probably knows what a lightsaber is. Otherwise, they would have just thrown it out, because it's a piece of metal and wood, unless you know what a lightsaber is. But also, like, Jedi aren't usually sold. They're usually just like taken over by the Empire. I don't know if the Empire would be so. They'd probably be willing to pay money to this random group of high functioning droids. But it seemed to me that if the Empire got word of it, they'd probably just go in and wreck the place and take the Jedi anyways. But I don't know.
Yeah, they did say the buyer wanted him alive.
Right? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Which made me think, well, is he going back to the Fortress Inquisitorius or whatever it's called that we see in Kenobi, where they do all the tests on the Jedi and have a bunch of Jedi underneath on Amber and all that sort of stuff?
Maybe. Yeah. Lots to speculate about. But yeah, you're right, John. It's not entirely clear.
Yeah, so I mean, that was, I guess, a little bit of my frustration in the first part with the droids, is I liked all the action and seeing them all get together, and then the surprise that Gungi was a Jedi and not just a typical Wookiee. But then at the same time, it was like, well, what were they there for in the first place? On their payload, who was he being sold to? Who, it was just like, get off the ship and get him home, and then, so I don't know. But I mean, overall, I liked the episode, but it was just, that was a little frustration. It's like, okay, is something going to be filled in later on, or was it just, a standalone episode, and that's it?
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
But
I did like Gungi is the Wookiee Padawan that we saw back in the Clone Wars, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought, and so it was nice to see Gungi come back and to see apparently survived Order 66 somehow. I liked, again, I think it was Hunter who said, don't know how you did it, but that's impressive.
Yeah, I think it was Hunter said that on their ship.
Yeah. After dispatching a bunch of droids and blasting their way off the station, they head back for Kashyyyk because that's where Gungi is trying to get. And apparently they aren't in any hurry to get back to Sid. So just arriving on Kashyyyk, I thought they did a really beautiful job of envisioning the planet. I mean, it was so lush, and every frame was just full of interesting life. And I mean, it's clear that Kashyyyk has been kind of one of the favorite planets of the Star Wars franchise, even though we don't visit it all that often. It's like we're always going to Tatooine. Yeah.
We've seen Kashyyyk twice. One in episode 3 and then now, I think. When it comes to screen time.
Oh, let's not forget the holiday special.
Yes. Yes.
I think everyone heard you rolling your eyes there, Ryan.
Yes, as an audible eye roll. One thing I loved about the way they portrayed Kashyyyk was that like alpine horn that they kept having in the backgrounds whenever they do things on the planet. Like they're flying in and they have that horn blare, and then the horn. It reminded me of, and this is a bit of a tangent, but the first thing it reminded me of was in the movie Arrival, where they're just panning up to the wall of mist where the aliens are behind. You know, there's these space aliens that have come to Earth and they don't know anything about them, and there's just this massive horn behind there that's really spooky and creepy, and it kind of gave me a similar feel when they were on Kashyyyk, where it's like, you know, the planet's beautiful, it's huge, but it's also very wild and very large, and you see everyone on the planet as being very small compared to these big trees in the planet, which I thought was a really cool way of showing that with the music.
I loved everything about it. John, did anything jump out at you about the world itself, about Kashyyyk?
No, it was a beautiful setup. I mean, they did a nice job with that. I liked how when they were walking in and then you could see them walking down the big slope or whatever it was. And it was just, I mean, the way they animated it and stuff was really nice. But like Ryan was saying, it's the whole, you know, later on when you get to meet the Kinrith or whatever the name of the spiders were.
Yes, yes.
When you see how big they are, and then, you know, and then later on, I don't know what creatures the Wookiees ride are called.
I don't know, but I want one.
They look like, you know, so it's like, I mean, yeah, that was, you know, just seeing how big all those things were. And, but I guess the thing was interesting was I liked how, you know, they brought up how Gungi really didn't know what Kashyyyk was like, because being a Padawan, I guess he was taken young, so it was only in his dreams or something that he had images of, you know, of what this, you know, planet looked like. So that was kind of interesting to think about. But
yeah, that reminded me of Anakin and his dreams of his mother and so on, and kind of this sense of probably all of the Jedi younglings have this longing for home that they have to manage in some way, whether healthily or unhealthily. I just looked it up. The creatures they're riding on are called Mylaya steeds, and yeah, they looked like, I don't know, giant lion / monkeys to me. It's like just a wild combination of creatures, and I loved it.
Ears reminded me of fox ears, like fox ears, you know, the big ones. Yeah,
I'm a big Rebels fan. That's no secret, and I loved the spider creatures in Rebels, and I particularly loved that these spider creatures kind of behave the same way. They're only aggressive if you are aggressive toward them. Mm-hmm. And I loved how Gungi sort of pushed forward, from the Bad Batch and used the Force to reach out to them and kind of connect with them. And I loved how, this is a theme that's really interesting to me, like in Rebels with Ezra, and in the recent Tales of the Jedi with Ahsoka. There's this theme of one of the key Force sensitivity markers is this ability to connect with or commune with animals.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Ezra there, because that's what I was going to say. I was like, man, Gungi's looking like Ezra Bridger out there.
Well, and very, very much looking like, getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. Well, not too much, because almost the next thing that happens is they come upon the Trandoshans, who are driving forward another captured Wookiee and are burning down some kind of ceremonial carved stones. Mm-hmm. And Gungi steps into action again, and you realize, or at least I realized, the way Gungi fights is like a Jedi, is not like the other Wookiees fight. And I thought that was kind of a cool character. The way the animators really made the fighting styles distinct, and yeah, Gungi looked like Ezra, looked like Anakin, looked like, any of these Jedi that we've seen take this, broad active stance and then just go into battle.
Yeah, he didn't look like what's his name from the Book of Boba Fett. He didn't fight like a Chrysostus or whatever his name was.
Yeah.
With those big punches and stuff.
Yeah.
That was cool, yeah. Thought it was, the more I thought about that scene, Gungi probably didn't even know what those stones were, which I thought was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But all he saw on them was pictures of Wookiees, and that was enough to set him off and go at it.
Yeah.
Because presumably, if he's never been to Kashyyyk, he doesn't know what village he's from. I don't think he knows anything about. He didn't know what they were doing with the trees later on in the episode. He didn't know anything. So I thought it was really cool that, he just saw it as, this is part of me. I don't know what this is, but I'm going to defend it anyways, which is really, really cool.
And he also saw the other Wookiee there, though, and the hostage,
mm-hmm.
and how he was treated, because you could see the pain in that Wookiee once they started setting those stones on fire, that it was really, obviously it was sacred and important, and it was painful for him too as well. But so probably my guess is that Gungi saw that as well, and then was able to connect just some of that importance. And I did enjoy the way he fought, because it is nice seeing a Jedi fight in these shows, because you don't see many Jedi, and to see that, the way that he uses this lightsaber, or as a hunter would say, the laser sword, or and stuff. But that was impressive, and I liked, definitely like that difference for the typical Wookiee way of fighting. But
there's a lot going on in this episode. Mm-hmm. We talk about the density of the imagery around Kashyyyk itself, and I think there are lots of layers of what's going on with the characters, and I'm not terribly familiar with the Trandoshans, and their history and their connection with the Empire, but there seems to be something significant going on there.
Well, can I go back real quick?
Yeah.
The one thing you're saying, there's different layers. There were some things too that, if you just, even though it was just like a glance, after Gungi used the Force with the spiders, and you can just, and even throughout, you'll see Omega, she'll just pause for a moment, and you can tell the wheels are turning in her head. This is something, and it's is it she's figuring out, there's something more with this force, or at least beginning maybe to question, what is this? Or you wonder, does she have a connection? It's like at that point too, is she feeling something like when he's doing that stuff? So it was like, so what I thought they did a good job is every now and then they would like focus on her just for a moment, and you could tell she was thinking about something, and typically it was when Gungi did something like with the force, and stuff. So I thought, so that's kind of intriguing for me as well in that. And then I was wondering, like you were talking about the Trandoshans, I'm wondering how that works with, it's like eventually we see there's some, stormtroopers or, some Imperial presence there, as well as the Trandoshans. And I was kind of curious, like, is there, Echo, I think, mentioned about potential outposts there, but are we talking like lots of outposts with Imperials, or are we just talking a small amount of them and a bunch of Trandoshans that are in charge of this area? And I wasn't, they mentioned later on that the Trandoshans, have a, kind of doing the dirty work for the Empire when it comes to the planet, but I just didn't know the extent of that. No, you're right. It's one of those things that this episode kind of left a little unclear, because and I don't know, I'm kind of a fan of it because it's like it's one of those details that just enough about that it implies that there's a lot more going on in the universe than we know about, but it doesn't like affect the story that's going on right here. It's like, okay, we still know Trandoshans are here doing bad stuff. Gungi steps in, and then, like you said, Omega right next to him. Seemed like every time Gungi did something, it was Omega like stepping in, and the number of times you saw the two of them like side by side or back to back or something. That was really, whether it's the Force or something else, I think they clearly had a connection of some kind.
Mm-hmm. The connection that comes to mind immediately is when Hunter says at the very end something about they don't get to be kids. That Gungi and Omega, very, very similar lives in a way where they didn't get the chance to be kids. They have to immediately start fending for themselves and making life or death decisions about them, presumably about people they love. We don't know what happened to Gungi. We know he was on the run. We don't know what that means. But yeah, whether it's through a Force connection, and I'm on team Omega is secretly Force sensitive or something like that. I hope that happens for real. But even if that doesn't end up happening, I think there's just a really deep sense of connection there because of how much both of them have had to deal with their own lives and how similar they are.
Yeah, not only do they have to fend for themselves, but they end up taking care of others too.
Mm-hmm.
Omega's saved the Bad Batch a number of times already, and Gungi is stepping in and saving, the other Wookiees, or at least helping to. And I was thinking too, it's obviously as a Jedi, Gungi's being hunted, and and of course, or on the Wookiee side, he's also being looked to be sold as a slave, depending on which. But Omega, she's also important, and they've had bounty hunters after her, so she's been hunted as well. She's not just here. I'm along with the Bad Batch for a ride. She's probably got some bounty still on her head, because they want her for being, or for cloning potentially, or we don't know what the Empire plans to do with her, but she's being hunted as well, like a Jedi is hunted, so there's another connection she would have with little Gungi that she knows what it's like to be chased after. And she made that point earlier too. Their home was destroyed by the Empire as well when they saw that first village. So it's like there's a lot of these little connections that she has with Gungi in this episode. I really like Gungi. I doubt they're going to bring him back, but I kind of hope they do.
I hope they work him in some way where he's a more developed Force user, a more developed Jedi. You know, Wookiees can live a long time. We know, like, what, 300, 400 years? They have a pretty long lifespan, so they could potentially work him into some, you know, if they do any sort of sequel content, or at least, you know, sequel-adjacent content, he could be there if he survives. Hopefully. I don't want them to kill him, obviously.
You're thinking in the Mandalorian Ahsoka timeline somewhere, maybe?
We know that Luke is looking for Jedi. Yeah. And Gungi needs to have his training completed. He could easily live, you know, at three more decades or however long it takes for Luke to get to the point where he's a Jedi and still not develop his Force abilities. Just like Baby Yoda, just like Grogu, living a long time and still being pretty young in the Force. So
yeah,
I hope that he shows up in some way. I hope we get something with him later, but it'd be cool, really cool to see a live action Gungi wielding a lightsaber. Man, that'd be neat.
Gungi and Grogu. Mm-hmm. This is like the buddy show that we want.
Yes. Exactly.
Oh man. And Mando's just going, I can't even deal with one kid. How am I going to deal with two?
Of course. Yeah.
Oh man. So they fight the Trandoshans and they rescue the adult warrior Wookie, who then takes them back to a village where they meet, you know, just sort of the normal Wookiee life with, you know, elders and children and everybody, and they're dealing with just the bad situation. And they realize that the Trandoshans are coming for that village, presumably in the same way that they came for the burnt down village that they first encountered. And I loved that the Wookiees are extending hospitality, but then saying, you're being hunted, you'd better go on your way before you get caught. Kind of saying, we'll fight our own battles. And the Bad Batch says, no, you don't have to do this alone. We're with you. Which again is like, okay, we're getting a sense of like, where are the Bad Batch's like moral principles, moral foundations? And a lot of it seems to do with like standing with other people, standing with those who and it's not like the Wookiees are totally defenseless, but standing with those who are having trouble defending themselves.
I've been holding out for a while that the Batch becomes part of the Path, which we saw in Kenobi. That was the thing that they revealed in Kenobi, where there's this whole group of people who are Underground Railroad shepherding Jedis out of harm's way, giving them new lives. I really hope that the Bad Batch becomes part of that, because we just had exposure to what it takes to get a Jedi back to their home world. No, it's real easy for them to start getting up into that, but I think it was interesting that the Batch of all people said that, because they're kind of doing it alone too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just them against the world. Really nobody else. I mean, they saw Rex briefly, and then he went away.
Yeah.
Sid's not really their friend.
And becoming less so.
Yeah, becoming less of a friend as she continues to put them in really bad situations and sort of gambles with them in some ways. So it's like, it was good to see the Batch taking that and saying that, but they also got to take it to heart, because, you know, they're doing the same thing. It's just a little bit more mobile, going all over the place.
Well, one thing I also found interesting, it's a little bit before that, but when they bring Grogu, when they bring Gungi back to that village, or they're taken to the village, Hunter, actually, it reminds me of the Mandalorian, because, you know, when he's talking to the leader and he says, we came because Gungi was in trouble, Jedi or not, he's still a child, and he needs his people. And the Mandalorian was always wanting to get Grogu to his people and stuff to help him it's pretty interesting because they were doing that partly to save him, but they're also feeling this obligation that he needs to be with his people. And I thought that that made me think of the Mandalorian story, especially for season 1 and stuff, and well, throughout the whole thing. But that was I thought that was an interesting little tie-in too. But it is neat that the thing I did like too was the whole part of willing to saying they didn't have to do that alone. And I like that part Ryan was saying because of just the whole they're the loners, but they're here to help, and so I think that's where you see their moral development as more of even though they're doing some of the things that Sid wants and maybe that aren't the best, they're still they still have this stronger moral drive to do what is right when called upon.
Yeah, and they seemed happier and more like more relaxed. Getting ready for battle with the Wookiees than they did making a trade for forged chain codes with the smugglers. And it's like, it's that if you focus on seek first the kingdom of God, all the other things will be added to you. There they are seeking to do this give aid to others, and that's where they find themselves kind of at home and at rest and rejuvenated.
Well, and what's really good too, I think, is when they go to when the Wookiees go to the tree for advice, the tribe, they don't say, "Oh, this is crazy." They're like, "Well, we'll get our help wherever we can get help." They're open to, and they're not judgmental of the Wookiee tribe. They're saying, they're just saying, okay, we'll take what we can get, and we'll do, with everything that we can. It's not, we'll shun this thing because we don't believe in it or we have a better plan. They're willing to listen to everything and, incorporate it into the battle plan that they're going to have to put together.
Yeah, I think "the trees have a plan" might have been my favorite line.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's talk about the spirituality of the trees of the Wookiees for a bit. Before we started recording, John, you said that this was really something that stood out to you.
Well, yeah. I mean, you see, in the last couple of years, I've been watching a lot, watching the series, and then of course I just did a bunch of audiobooks on the Lord of the Rings, and and then you have the trees playing roles in that, especially in Narnia, where they actually go to battle in one of the movie. I don't know if it was in the books as much as in the movie, where they actually go on the offensive, and I forget which one it is, maybe the second one where
the Prince Caspian.
Yeah, I think and stuff, and then. But then also the way they kneel down and, with the tree at where they kneel down with the tree to get the advice. It's been a while since I watched the movie Avatar, but they do have that, the Tree of Souls, and it plays such a big role.
The James Cameron movie.
Yeah, the James Cameron movie.
Yeah.
And that plays a big role in that. And it's just kind of, there they are kneeling and, going. And actually, I like that part too, though, as they're kneeling. It's like they're kind of praying in a sense with their hand on the on the trees and stuff to get their the input, and I guess coming humbly to it by going down to their knees as well and stuff. And it was just kind of, it's silly. Or at first when you hear the quote that you really like there with the trees, it's like it's just the more I thought about it and stuff. It really hit home that, where you see it in other literature and stuff and movies, the impact and the importance of, whether they listen to trees or they involve the trees in the plans. And like, especially in Narnia too, the trees are always sending messages as you talk. And then, so they're highly involved as well. And here they're giving, the trees are giving messages to the Wookiees of what to do. So that was pretty interesting.
I saw another, I don't know, possible Tolkien reference. The water that the Wookiees were drinking, and like I don't think I saw them eat anything during the episode, so it was almost like this water was their sustenance, and that reminded me of the Ent drafts that Merry and Pippin drank that set their hair a curling, and in Lord of the Rings, and there were a lot of very kind of Tolkien-esque or maybe Inklings-esque. I don't know if they were deliberate references, but kind of an atmosphere or a vibe that I got from this episode.
Well, and also with the Lord of the Rings, one of the big issues in that book was how, the Ents and all those trees were destroyed. So that was, and then as you had in that scene before with that Trandoshan commander saying, okay, we got to find that Jedi, raise the trees to the ground or whatever, it was like destroy all this stuff. So it's like the Empire's going in to destroy, and it's kind of similar with what you see in the Lord of the Rings when, they're destroying all the trees and as well and stuff and all the wildlife.
Yeah. It's just this intense hostility between the kind of the engine of seeking power and the the kind of keeping and tending the garden as it were. I also loved the way just really consistently throughout the episode the bad guys were always using fire. Fire was their big weapon, and even when like the head Trandoshan goes chasing after Gungi, it's a flamethrower versus a lightsaber, and so it's like this fire is the enemy of the trees, and like from the moment they land, the Bad Batch is always we gotta make sure we contain the fire. We gotta make sure that the fire doesn't get out of control. In other words, we got to protect the trees. Which I don't know. I live in the Pacific Northwest, where
I live in Oregon.
In Oregon, okay, yeah. So you know all about the wildfires.
Detroit fire a few years ago.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So
it almost burned down my grandparents' house.
Yeah. I know that like there have been various theories about how to manage wildfires over the years, and the never let them burn has turned out to be a bad idea. Certainly letting them burn out of control is a bad idea. We're kind of figuring out how to do like better forest management to really, cultivate forests. But yeah, I was getting that kind of gotta cultivate the forest, gotta protect the forest, and so on.
I like the detail that they stop the fire by digging. It's a very consistent thing with how it actually works. When you're having to contain a fire, you dig out a fire line, and you don't go around with giant fire trucks with water on them, because the water just runs out, and you're not doing anything anyways, because there's acres and acres of forest around you. I guess the one thing I wish would have happened was after the batch was all done digging, I wish they would just collapsed on the ground and started sleeping, because that's just about what firefighters during the fire season do. They dig for 12 hours and then they just collapse. They wake up and do it again. So that was, I loved all the scenes where they were just fighting the fire with dirt. It's very real.
Yeah, they kind of like toward the very last scene where they kind of come out of the trees and Gungi sits down next to Omega and they both look kind of tired. Yeah, that's fine, but you're right, it's nowhere near the exhaustion that real life firefighters experience.
I was wondering too, though, with the trees and the way the Wookiees communicate with them. You don't hear, your typical Wookiee thought is like Chewbacca and stuff, or But my question is, how much are they in touch with the Force? To be able to communicate with the trees, and how much, it's like, that to me is.
How much are they the trees, or they the
well,
Wookiees
the
in touch with the
Wookiees
Force?
are in touch with the Force, because I mean now you have Gungi as a or at least Force sensitive, because if you're communicating with nature in that way, you would think that they have a strong connection to the Force or something, as well as and then your typical Gungi is your Padawan. But I just was wondering, because too, when the leader of that tribe comes to Gungi, she kind of puts her head against his head, and I'm like, is she it's like he's cradling it a little bit like a hug, but then at the same time it's like, is that a hug, or is she trying to reach out a little bit and find out more about him through the Force? It was just, and then later on, of course, with the trees, and then and getting the guidance from them, and then it's just, that made me wonder though a little bit more about, maybe Wookiees are more Force sensitive than we give them credit for over the years.
Maybe.
Because I remember there's like a throwaway line in the Clone Wars where they say, "Oh wow, your people must be very proud of you. Your Wookiees are right. Wookiees sensitive to the Force are quite rare." And this scene kind of challenged that, where it's like, maybe the Jedi were just wrong, because they were wrong about a lot of things, and maybe they just weren't giving the Wookiees as much credit where credit was due, because all of those Wookiees, they were participating in the ritual. Who knows if that means they were actually, Force sensitive and speaking to the trees, but they all seemed to know exactly what to do and what they were supposed to do. And it really makes you think, if being Force sensitive is really as rare as they mentioned randomly in the Clone Wars.
Yeah, the Jedi are definitely looking for a very particular kind of Force sensitivity.
Well, and it's not everybody speaks Wookiee, so it's like maybe there's just a loss in translation too. It's like, oh well, we can't understand them even though we have the Force and stuff. It's like, or then you have the typical, or the brute force Wookiee that that gets angry and can rip the arms off somebody or out of their sockets or whatever, and it's just kind of, but yeah, so then they see that and they don't see, wow, this is really sensitive and in touch with the Force kind of people or creature.
Although, and I think this is the first, at least in any Star Wars media I've seen, I think this is the first time we've seen a non-Wookiee try to speak, I think it's called Shriwook, the Wookiees language. Wrecker, of all people.
Anyone can do it. Wrecker is the guy.
Yeah.
he loved his time with the Wookiees. That was something that was great.
Yeah, right at home. Yeah, and he loved that Wookiee water.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts about this episode, or maybe about the series as a whole, where it's kind of sending the Bad Batch as a series?
I was going to say that Trandoshan, who died at the end, took it, or we assume he died didn't he get pulled up by the spiders or whatever it was, and that was pretty harsh. And that's why, and I think it was that scene that made me think more back to the Narnia, where you had the trees, like, in the battle and ripping people, pulling people up and stuff like that. It was like, of course, this was spiders, I guess, but it was just, when I saw that, it was like, okay, we didn't see him die, but we have a pretty good idea of something bad's happening to him, because probably because he's the one telling him burn down the Force, and and now he gets his comeuppance.
I very much a comeuppance. I liked that the trees have a plan. The plan that the trees had was to use the hostility of the Trandoshans and the Empire against them, to let them provoke the Kinraths, the spider creatures, and face the consequences. Yeah.
I had a question for both of you guys. Since we definitely had inklings of Omega possibly being force sensitive, do you guys think that Omega will end up having some sort of connection to the Force over the course of the season? Think that'll get revealed, or do you think that that's just not going to happen?
What do you think, John?
I think there might be something to it because, at the end of it, she was, she went to the tree with Gungi, so we don't know, did she feel something there or not, and stuff. But then also the fact that as she's watching the Force in action, with Gungi, and you saw her thinking, or you could tell she was being impacted by it. Maybe she is feeling something, and it's like, maybe she's feeling in touch with the Force in the past, but didn't know that. And of course, the Bad Batch they don't know how to explain it to her. And so maybe as she sees, gets a little more exposure to it, maybe over time, she'll realize she does have that.
That's a possibility. I think what I've noticed about Omega, like right from the beginning, is she's always watching everybody very closely, and she imitates what she admires. She's always like, I'm thinking of like some of the very early episodes of season 1 where she's like imitating Hunter's movements, like move for move. She's very imitative, and it's more subtle as the seasons go on, but she's always kind of watching and imitating and learning from others. So maybe she's just seeing something interesting in Gungi and imitating and learning from that. But yeah, I mean, it's entirely possible that it's the Force that is kind of leading her to learn in this way, and to become really adept at everything that she kind of imitates and learns.
I don't want to turn this into a 3-hour video essay. Yeah, I think that Omega is probably going to be ending up revealed as Force sensitive. This was just one of the things for me, but she's also done some pretty crazy athletic things that you don't really see, like when she used those like crabs as a springboard. That was a big jump, and like I get I get that she was using him as a springboard, but like if the same way that in Rebels you saw Ezra do that giant jump, and you're like, oh yeah, he's got it. That's what I thought of when I saw Omega do that jump. I was like, she probably has something there. But I sure hope that she ends up. I sure hope that they end up having that be a big reveal at some point in the season. Who knows?
It would certainly tie the Bad Batch into the rest of the mythos in a stronger way. Yeah.
Well, it also make you wonder. I mean, obviously they want her. They want her back. The Empire wants her back, and for some reason, and is it just because she's the clone with the that, what was it, the bloodline or whatever that she has, or is there something more in that that they need from her as well? So, and then one thing too was interesting is I know Hunter had the line at the end, but when the leader talked about it, it's kind of setting up maybe more the leader of the tribe. She said, when a young one leaves, the tree weeps, but when they return, the tree sing. As the child has found his new home, perhaps one day we all will find a new path. I think it's more than just Omega. She's talking, it's the Bad Batch, and what path are they taking going forward and stuff. It's it's going to be. So I think that's probably setting up the next, or that we're going to finally maybe stop, or maybe there's going to be less or fewer standalone episodes, and maybe more that tie in together to build that path.
I mean, the next episode is titled the clone conspiracy. So I don't know.
I hope we get another Crosshair episode soon. That's something I want to see.
Yeah, whether like a standalone Crosshair or bringing him in contact with the Batch again. Yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot to look forward to. But this is the time in our episode where we take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Secrets of Star Wars. And this episode, we'd like to include Kathleen C., Daniel C., Donald M., Julie D., and Sandra M. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Wars and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. Be sure to subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or directly on the SQPN YouTube channel. To find previous episodes of Secrets of Star Wars and to send us feedback, please visit sqpn.com/starwars. You can email us at starwars@sqpn.com or follow StarQuest on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia or on Twitter @SQPN. Or you could join our Discord community at sqpn.com/Discord. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next episode of The Bad Batch. As I said, it's called The Clone Conspiracy. Sounds pretty exciting. Till then, Ryan, thanks for joining us in the Secrets of Star Wars.
Thank you.
And John, thanks for coming along. It's great to talk with you.
Thank you. It was fun.
Once again, I've been Robert King. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest network you're sure to enjoy. The Secrets of Technology. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/technology.